When my daughter looked me in the eyes and said, "You're going to die alone like you deserve," I felt something inside me shatter. After 37 years of marriage, my wife had walked out, leaving me broken at 63. What Emily didn't know, what no one knew, was that for 6 months I'd been secretly dating her best friend's mother, a forbidden relationship that would soon explode in our faces. But beneath this tangled web of secrets lies a darker truth about my ex-wife's departure, one that will rock the foundations of our family and force us all to question who the real victims and villains truly are. How do you rebuild when everything you believed about your life turns out to be a carefully constructed lie? How do you forgive the unforgivable? And most importantly, how do you find the courage to love again when everyone, including your own daughter, believes you deserve to die alone? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, this story will break your heart and then carefully piece it back together. Follow our channel, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because trust me, this story of betrayal, secrets, and unexpected redemption is one you won't want to miss. I still hear her voice, the way it cut through the air like a knife through butter. The way her words weren't just spoken, but hurled at me with such venom that I physically recoiled. My daughter, Emily, standing there in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd once lifted her onto the counter to help me bake cookies when she couldn't reach, staring at me with eyes that used to beg for bedtime stories but now radiated nothing but contempt. "You're going to die alone, like you deserve." Those words, they weren't just a sentence, they were an execution. I felt something inside me collapse, as if someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hands. The worst part wasn't even the cruelty. It was that tiny voice in the back of my mind whispering that maybe, just maybe, she was right. She said it 3 months after her mother left us, when the house had grown cold and empty, when the silence between us had become its own presence. I was 63 years old. I had dedicated my life to my family, worked extra shifts at the automotive plant for 37 years so Emily could go to college without debt, postponed my own dreams so hers could flourish, and suddenly, I was nothing but a burden, an embarrassment, a failure. In that moment, everything stopped. The wall clocks ticking, the traffic noise outside our suburban Boston home, even the smell of burnt coffee in the pot I'd forgotten about. Only the echo of those words remained alive inside me, bouncing off the walls of my hollow chest. I didn't cry in front of her. I just slowly walked down the stairs, each step feeling like I was dragging lead weights. Deep down, I wondered if she was right. Maybe my destiny really was to die alone, forgotten in some nursing home where no one would visit. The thought settled in my stomach like concrete. You can picture it, can't you? An old man sitting in his recliner, the one with the worn armrests and the small coffee stain on the right side. The television on, but muted, just for the illusion of company. The tick-tock of the grandfather clock that had been my father's. The silence swallowing me whole. The collection of framed photos I couldn't bear to take down. Emily's graduation, our family trip to Yellowstone, her mother and I on our wedding day, all ghosts of a life I no longer had. But what nobody knew, not Emily, not our neighbors who whispered about poor Frank whose wife finally had enough, not the cashier at the local Walgreens who always asked how I was doing with that pitying look, was that during this period of darkness, a woman had already breathed a little life back into my hollow chest. Her name was Linda Morrison. The secret was safely guarded. She was the mother of Emily's best friend, Jessica. If Emily had discovered it then, that night of the kitchen confrontation, her hatred would have been even more intense. The betrayal would have been complete in her eyes. But I couldn't go back anymore. I couldn't unfeel what I'd started to feel. I couldn't unsee the light that had begun to pierce through my darkness. Linda and I had been seeing each other for 6 months by then. 6 months of stolen moments, of coffee shops 2 towns over, of text messages deleted immediately after reading. 6 months of feeling like a teenager again. Nervous, excited, alive, while simultaneously feeling like a traitor to my own family. That night, after Emily went upstairs, slamming her bedroom door so hard that the photo frames rattled on the wall, I sat in the darkness of our living room and pulled out my phone. I stared at Linda's last message. "Thinking of you. Hope today was better." My fingers hovered over the screen. I should end it, I thought. This relationship was only going to bring more pain when discovered. It was selfish. It was wrong. But then I remembered the emptiness before Linda, the days that blurred together, the meals eaten standing over the sink, the conversations with no one, I typed back, "Emily said I'm going to die alone. Maybe she's right." Linda's response came quickly. "She's wrong, and one day she'll know just how wrong she is." I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. I didn't know the secrets that were already in motion, the truths that would eventually shatter everything we thought we knew about our families. I didn't know that Emily's discovery of my relationship with Linda would be just the beginning of a storm that would either destroy us all or somehow, against all odds, bring healing to wounds I didn't even know existed. All I knew was that my daughter thought I deserved to die alone, and despite the warmth of Linda's message lighting up my phone in the darkness, a part of me believed Emily might be right. I met Linda, Emily's best friend's mother, in a way that was almost mundane, yet somehow felt like fate had orchestrated it. It was a Tuesday afternoon at Wilson's Grocery on Maple Street, the kind of local supermarket where they still carry your bags to the car if you ask. I wasn't looking for connection that day. I was just a lonely old man buying microwave dinners and discounted day-old bread, navigating the aisles with the mechanical precision of someone just going through the motions of living. She was in the produce section, carefully selecting apples with the concentration of someone performing surgery. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, silver strands catching the fluorescent lights. I noticed her before she noticed me. The careful way she examined each fruit, turning it over in her hands as if reading its secrets. When she dropped an apple, I caught it mid-air before it could hit the floor, a reflex from my baseball days that apparently hadn't abandoned me in old age. Our eyes met as I handed it back, and for a second, just one fleeting moment, I saw in her eyes the same loneliness that had become my constant companion since Margaret left. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing your own pain reflected back at you. "Good catch," she said with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You just saved this apple from a bruised fate." "My reflexes aren't what they used to be," I replied, surprised to hear my own voice making small talk. "But they still kick in for apple emergencies." She laughed then, a genuine laugh that transformed her face, and introduced herself as Linda Morrison. The name registered immediately. Jessica Morrison was Emily's best friend since middle school. I had seen Linda from afar at school events, had probably even exchanged pleasantries at graduation, but we'd never really spoken. Our daughter's friendship had never extended to the parents. We chatted there between the produce stands and the dairy coolers like two strangers starved for conversation. She told me she was divorced 3 years now. I shared that Margaret had left 6 months ago, though I didn't mention the shame that came with being abandoned at 63, or how the neighbors looked at me with pity when I collected the mail. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" she asked suddenly, surprising both of us. I saw her cheeks flush slightly as if she couldn't believe her own boldness. "I'd like that," I heard myself say, even as alarm bells rang in my head. This wasn't just any woman. This was the mother of Emily's best friend. This was dangerous territory. But loneliness is its own kind of desperation, the kind that makes you take risks you'd never consider if you weren't drowning in silence. We met 3 days later at a small coffee shop in Brookline, far enough from our neighborhood that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. It wasn't love at first sight. It was recognition. I recognized in her the same void that had been eating away at me, the same forced smile that didn't reach the eyes, the same practiced answers to, "How are you doing?" that revealed nothing of the truth. Without planning it, we began meeting regularly. Coffee shops at first, then quiet dinners in restaurants where the lighting was dim and the booths offered privacy. We were careful, so careful. Never the same place twice. Always looking over our shoulders. Our phones always on silent. Always facing down on the table. I began to live for those stolen hours. The way she listened when I spoke. The way she didn't offer empty platitudes when I admitted how much it hurt that Emily blamed me for her mother leaving, as if I could have prevented it somehow. Linda understood pain in a way that only someone who has lived through it can. Still, there was something about Linda that left me unsettled. A guardedness. When the conversation turned to the past, particularly about our former spouses, her eyes would shift away, finding sudden interest in her coffee cup or the pattern on the tablecloth. There were questions she didn't answer directly, small silences where responses should have been. "Did you and Jessica's father end on good terms?" I asked once over pasta at an Italian restaurant 20 miles from home. Her hand froze, fork suspended midway to her mouth. "It's complicated," she finally said. "Some doors are better left closed." At the time, I ignored these small warnings. I was too grateful for her company, too relieved to have someone look at me without pity. too desperate to feel something other than the hollow ache that had become my constant companion. Today, I know better. I know that each of those silences was a locked door hiding secrets that would eventually come crashing down around all of us. Every hesitation was a warning I chose to ignore. Every deflected question was a clue I was too blind to see. But back then, in those early days of our secret relationship, all I knew was that, for the first time since Margaret walked out, I felt something other than emptiness. And that feeling, dangerous as it was, had become the only thing keeping me alive. Hide or live. That was the choice I needed to make. After 3 months of secret meetings with Linda, I found myself standing at a crossroads I never expected to face in my 60s. Our clandestine coffee dates and hushed conversations in dimly lit restaurants had become the only bright spots in my increasingly gray existence. But they weren't enough anymore. The secrecy that had once felt thrilling now felt suffocating. That night, I'd endured another silent dinner with Emily. She'd come home from college for the weekend, supposedly to do laundry and raid the refrigerator, but I suspected she was checking up on me, making sure I hadn't completely fallen apart since her mother left. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the scraping of forks against plates the only sound breaking the heavy silence between us. "How are your classes?" I ventured, desperate for any connection. "Fine," she replied without looking up from her plate. "And Jessica, how is she doing?" At the mention of Linda's daughter, Emily's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Why are you asking about Jessica?" I shrugged, trying to keep my expression neutral, fighting the heat I felt creeping up my neck. "Just making conversation. She's been your best friend since 7th grade. Emily studied me for a moment too long, then returned her attention to her food. "She's fine too." That was it. 20 minutes of silence followed before she excused herself to her room, leaving me alone with a half-eaten meal and the crushing weight of unspoken words. After washing the dishes, slowly, methodically, as if the simple task could somehow order my chaotic thoughts, I retreated to my bedroom. The room that Margaret and I had shared for over 30 years now felt cavernous with just me in it. I'd kept her side untouched for months after she left, as if preserving it might somehow convince her to return. Only recently had I finally put her things in boxes in the attic, a concession to reality that had felt like another kind of abandonment. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at Linda's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the message icon, as doubts crashed through my mind like waves against rocks. What was I doing? Was I really considering pursuing a relationship that would likely destroy what little remained of my connection with Emily? Was a few hours of feeling alive worth the risk of losing my daughter completely? But then I remembered the suffocating loneliness of the months after Margaret left, the endless empty evenings, the conversations with the television just to hear a human voice, the way I'd started talking to Margaret's plants because they were the only living things that didn't look at me with pity or judgment. I made my decision. With trembling fingers, I typed, "I want to see you, even if it's wrong." I hit send before I could change my mind. It was the first time I hadn't hidden behind the excuse of loneliness, the first time I'd admitted, to Linda and to myself, that what was happening between us had become something I was choosing, not just something I was falling into out of desperation. Her response came almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting, as if she'd somehow sensed my internal struggle. Then no more hiding in coffee shops. It was both an invitation and a warning. From that point forward, there would be no turning back. We were stepping out of the shadows, not into the full light of day perhaps, but at least into the dusk. We would no longer live solely in stolen moments and whispered conversations. We began to see each other more often, though still with a measure of discretion. We graduated from out-of-the-way coffee shops to quiet restaurants closer to home. We took walks in the park near the community college, no longer bothering to maintain a careful distance between us as we strolled. We even went to a movie once, sitting in the back row like teenagers, her hand finding mine in the darkness. Each encounter was a calculated risk. Someone could see us, someone could tell. Every time my phone rang, my heart would leap into my throat, certain it was Emily calling to confront me with the truth. But the call never came. That same week, while looking for an old tax document, I found a photograph of Margaret tucked away in the back of my desk drawer. It was from our 20th anniversary trip to Cape Cod. Her hair blowing in the sea breeze, her smile bright against the backdrop of the ocean. I'd forgotten I had this picture, or perhaps I'd deliberately hidden it away when the sight of her face became too painful. I turned it over and discovered something I'd never noticed before. A handwritten message in Margaret's elegant script. Never look back, only forward. I wasn't sure if it was a message meant for me or a reminder she'd written to herself. That phrase, forgotten in a photograph, would come back to haunt me in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. I placed the photo back in the drawer, but the words stayed with me. Never look back, only forward. Was that permission? A warning? Or simply the kind of empty platitude you write on the back of a vacation photo, never expecting it to be scrutinized for deeper meaning years later by a husband you would eventually abandon? That night, I called Linda. "I want to take you to dinner," I said. "Somewhere nice, not hiding anymore." There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough that I worried I'd pushed too far, too fast. Then her voice, soft but resolute. "I'd like that, Frank. It's time we stopped pretending we're doing something wrong." But were we? That question kept me awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Were we doing something wrong? Or were we simply two lonely people trying to find a little happiness in the wreckage of our previous lives? I didn't have an answer then, but I would learn, in the most painful way possible, that sometimes the greatest wrongs aren't in what we do, but in what we fail to see coming. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. In our little suburb of Boston, news traveled faster than the commuter rail that carried businessmen downtown each morning. Eyes were everywhere, whispers in every aisle of the grocery store, in every pew at St. Mary's, at every table in Donna's Diner, where the blue-haired ladies gathered for their Thursday morning coffee clatches. The first sign came on a crisp fall morning when I was raking leaves in my front yard. Mrs. Abernathy, who had lived across the street for as long as I could remember, shuffled over in her bedroom slippers, clutching her cardigan against the October chill. She'd been Margaret's friend more than mine, but since the divorce, she'd taken to checking on me with casseroles I didn't ask for and advice I didn't want. "Morning, Frank," she called, her voice too cheerful for someone who was about to pry. "Yard's looking nice." I leaned on my rake, already bracing myself. "Morning, Edith. How's the arthritis?" She waved away my question like an annoying fly. "Oh, same as always. Say, I've been meaning to ask you." She lowered her voice, though there wasn't another soul in sight. "That lady I've seen you with around town, isn't she the mother of Emily's friend? The tall one with the silver streak in her hair?" The rake handle suddenly felt slippery in my palms. I tightened my grip to stop my hands from shaking. "Linda?" "Yes, she's Jessica Morrison's mother. We've run into each other a few times." Mrs. Abernathy's eyebrows arched so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "Run into each other? Is that what they're calling it these days?" She gave a little laugh that held no humor. "Well, you two seemed quite friendly at Antonio's last weekend, holding hands across the table and all." Antonio's was a small Italian restaurant 15 miles away. I'd chosen it specifically because I thought it was far enough from our neighborhood to avoid exactly this kind of encounter. The world truly is too small for big secrets. I deflected, mumbling something about catching up with old friends, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a prisoner demanding release. As soon as Mrs. Abernathy shuffled back across the street, I pulled out my phone and texted Linda, "We need to be more careful. The neighbors are talking." Her response was immediate and unexpected. "Let them talk. I'm tired of hiding." That afternoon, as I was sorting through bills at the kitchen table, I heard Emily's key in the front door. She wasn't supposed to be home from college until Thanksgiving, still weeks away. The sound filled me with both joy and dread. Joy at seeing my daughter, dread at what might have brought her home unannounced. "Dad?" she called, dropping her backpack in the hallway with a thud that echoed through the house. "In the kitchen," I replied, quickly shoving my phone under a pile of mail. I'd been looking at a photo Linda had sent me earlier that day. Nothing inappropriate, just her smiling at the camera during her lunch break, but it felt like incriminating evidence nonetheless. Emily appeared in the doorway, her face unreadable. "Surprise visit," she said, not moving to hug me as she once might have. "I had a group project meeting near here, so I thought I'd crash for the night." "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it despite my nerves. "Are you hungry? I can make something." She shook her head, moving to the refrigerator and peering inside. "I'll just grab a yogurt. Oh, and Jessica says hi." My heart skipped a beat at the mention of Linda's daughter. "You saw Jessica today?" "Yeah, she was part of the group project." Emily turned to face me, yogurt in hand, studying me with an intensity that made me feel transparent. She mentioned her mom's been happier lately, said she's been seeing someone. I forced myself to maintain eye contact, though every instinct screamed to look away. Oh, that's nice. Emily peeled the foil top off the yogurt container, still watching me. Weird thing is, she won't tell Jessica who it is, keeping it all mysterious. She dipped her spoon into the yogurt, then paused before taking a bite. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Dad? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and dangerous. I felt caught in the crosshairs of my daughter's suspicion, yet not quite in the bullseye. She didn't know, not for certain, but she was circling the truth, getting closer with each passing day. How would I know who Linda is dating? I managed, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Emily shrugged, finally breaking eye contact to focus on her yogurt. Just asking. You've seemed different lately too. Less, I don't know, pathetic. The word stung, but I swallowed the hurt. I've been trying to get out more, join some activities. Good for you, she said, but there was something in her tone I couldn't quite identify. Suspicion, perhaps, or something darker. She headed upstairs with her yogurt, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and sweating palms. At the same time that Emily was growing more suspicious, I was noticing strange patterns in her behavior. She began spending more time at Jessica's house, coming home with a perfume scent that wasn't hers, laughing at inside jokes she wouldn't explain. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch her staring at me with an expression that wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite pity, but something murkier, more complex. Each day, I felt my daughter slipping further away, building walls I couldn't scale, creating a life that had no room for me. And I was terrified that when she inevitably discovered the truth about Linda and me, the chasm between us would become an abyss too deep for any bridge to span. Linda, too, was carrying burdens I was only beginning to glimpse. One night, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, she suddenly turned to me with tears in her eyes. "There are things about your ex-wife that I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. "Things I can't tell you yet." I sat in stunned silence, a potent mixture of anger and fear coursing through my veins. "What things?" I finally asked. "What could you possibly know about Margaret that I don't?" Linda shook her head, refusing to meet my eyes. "I'm not ready. And trust me, you're not ready either." That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I wondered what secrets could possibly link these two women, my ex-wife and my new. What was Linda to me? Girlfriend seemed too juvenile a term for what we shared, but lover felt too illicit, too shallow for the depth of connection we'd forged in our shared loneliness. Whatever she was, Linda had just handed me a ticking time bomb, with no indication of when it might explode. And as I finally drifted into a restless sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to tumble into depths I couldn't even begin to fathom. The pieces didn't fit together. I kept turning them over in my mind like a detective with scattered evidence, trying to make sense of a mystery I couldn't quite grasp. Why did Linda always hesitate when I mentioned Margaret? Why did Emily return from Jessica's house more irritated with me than ever? What was I missing? It was a Wednesday evening in late October when I first noticed the pattern. Emily had stopped by unexpectedly again, her third surprise visit in 2 weeks. She claimed she needed to pick up some winter clothes she'd left behind, but I suspected her motives ran deeper. She'd spent the afternoon at Jessica's house, supposedly working on another group project, though I was beginning to doubt how many group projects one college course could possibly assign. "How's Jessica?" I asked, trying to sound casual as I stirred the pasta sauce I was making for dinner. I'd taken up cooking as a form of therapy after Margaret left, something to fill the endless empty evenings. Tonight was Margaret's favorite, linguine with clam sauce. I hadn't realized I was making it until I was already halfway through the recipe, muscle memory guiding my hands to ingredients we'd once shared. Emily looked up from her phone, her expression guarded. "Fine. Her mom says hi." I nearly dropped the wooden spoon, red sauce splattering on the stovetop. "You saw Linda today? She dropped by to bring us lunch." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why? Is that weird?" No, I said quickly, turning back to the stove to hide my face. "Just making conversation." "Right." The skepticism in her voice was unmistakable. "Anyway, Jessica's mom seemed, I don't know, jumpy, like she was nervous about something, and she kept asking about you." My heart hammered against my ribs. About me? What did she want to know? Emily shrugged, but her casual demeanor felt calculated. Just how you were doing. If you were seeing anyone. Normal stuff. She paused, watching me closely. I told her you were still pathetically single as far as I knew. The barb stung, but I was too preoccupied with the implications of Linda's questions to react. Why would she ask Emily about me when we'd spoken on the phone just that morning? What game was she playing? That was nice of her to ask. I managed, focusing intently on the bubbling sauce. Emily stood up, stretching like a cat waking from a nap. I'm going to shower before dinner. As she walked past me toward the stairs, I caught a whiff of an unfamiliar perfume. Something floral and expensive, not Emily's usual scent. And not Jessica's either. I'd been around the girl enough over the years to recognize her preference for fruity body sprays from the mall. That night after Emily went to bed, I sat in my darkened living room staring at my phone. I wanted to call Linda to demand answers about her conversation with Emily, but something held me back. A nagging sense that I was missing something crucial, something that would make all these scattered puzzle pieces snap into place. Instead, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, pictures of happier times with Margaret and Emily, back when we were still a family. In one taken at Emily's high school graduation, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. In the background, barely visible behind a cluster of other parents, stood Linda. She wasn't looking at the camera or at her own daughter. She was staring directly at Margaret, and the expression on her face wasn't the polite disinterest of a casual acquaintance. It was intense, focused, almost predatory. I zoomed in, my fingers trembling slightly. The pixelation made the details fuzzy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at something significant. Had Linda known Margaret better than she'd let on? Had there been some history between them that preceded our relationship? The next day, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done in all my years at the automotive plant until Margaret left, and drove to the coffee shop where Linda worked as a manager. I parked across the street, feeling like a character in one of those detective shows Margaret used to binge watch, and waited. Linda emerged around noon, presumably on her lunch break. Instead of eating at one of the cafe tables outside as she often did, she walked briskly down the street and turned the corner. Curiosity overrode my better judgment, and I followed at a distance, feeling both ridiculous and strangely exhilarated by my amateur sleuthing. She led me to a small park 3 blocks away, where she sat on a bench and pulled out her phone. After a brief conversation, she looked up expectantly. I ducked behind a tree, feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment at my own behavior. What was I doing? Spying on a woman I cared about because of a suspicious look in an old photograph? I was about to leave, to drive home and pretend this momentary insanity had never happened, when another figure approached Linda's bench. A young woman with familiar brown hair. Jessica, Linda's daughter, my daughter's best friend. They sat close together, heads bent in intense conversation. There was nothing inherently suspicious about a mother and daughter meeting for lunch, but something about their body language, the furtive glances, the way Linda kept checking her surroundings, sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't hear what they were saying from my position, but at one point, Jessica's voice rose enough for me to catch a fragment. Has to know eventually. This isn't fair to any of us. Linda responded by placing a warning hand on her daughter's arm, her expression pleading. Jessica shook her head, clearly frustrated, but lowered her voice again. 10 minutes later, they parted ways. Jessica heading back toward the college campus, Linda returning to the coffee shop. I stayed hidden until they were both out of sight, my mind racing with new questions. That night, I lay awake for hours, connecting dots that seemed to lead nowhere. Emily's increasing hostility, Linda's evasiveness about Margaret, the strange meeting between Linda and Jessica, the look in that graduation photo. I didn't know it then, but my daughter was growing closer by the day to discovering the truth about Linda and me, and when that happened, the words she had already hurled at me would seem gentle compared to what was to come. I still didn't understand the full picture, the complex web of relationships and secrets that bound us all together, but I was beginning to suspect that I wasn't just a participant in this unfolding drama. I was a pawn in a game whose rules I didn't understand, moved by hands I couldn't see. And the most terrifying thought of all? Perhaps I always had been. It was a Saturday night in early November when everything finally exploded. The day had begun with deceptive normalcy, weak autumn sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains, the distant sound of children playing in the neighbor's yard, the comforting ritual of making my morning coffee. Nothing to suggest that by nightfall, what remained of my world would be in ashes. I'd spent the afternoon raking leaves and cleaning gutters, the kind of mindless physical labor that helped quiet the questions that had been plaguing me since I'd seen Linda and Jessica in the park. Linda and I had plans to meet for dinner at 8, a new Italian place in Cambridge that she'd been wanting to try, far enough from our neighborhood to feel safe, close enough to her apartment that we could go back there afterward without the long drive home in the dark. I was in the shower when I heard the front door slam with enough force to rattle the bathroom mirror. Immediately, I knew it was Emily. No one else in my life entered a room with such dramatic flair, a trait she'd inherited from her mother, though she'd deny the similarity if confronted with it. "Dad!" Her voice echoed up the stairs, sharp with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. "Dad, get down here now!" I shut off the water, my stomach clenching with a foreboding that seemed to spread through my body like ice water in my veins. Quickly, I toweled off and pulled on jeans and an old sweater, my hair still dripping as I made my way downstairs. Emily was standing in the living room, her face flushed, her hands shaking. She looked like she'd been running, or crying, or both. In her right hand, she clutched her phone so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. "Emily? What's wrong? Are you hurt?" I moved toward her, instinctively reaching out, but she stepped back as if my touch might burn her. "Don't," she said, her voice low and trembling. "Don't pretend you care about me now." I froze, confusion mingling with the dread that was steadily building in my chest. "What are you talking about? Of course I care. Save it." She thrust her phone toward me, the screen illuminated with a photo. It took me a moment to register what I was seeing. Linda and me, sitting across from each other at a dimly lit table, our hands entwined, both of us smiling in a way I hadn't smiled in years. It was from our dinner the previous weekend, a moment of happiness captured and now weaponized. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own ragged breathing. Emily's eyes never left my face, watching for my reaction with the focused intensity of a predator stalking wounded prey. "Emily, I can explain." "Explain what?" She cut in, her voice rising. "Explain how you've been sleeping with Jessica's mom behind everyone's backs. Explain how you've been lying to my face every time I asked if you were seeing someone. Or maybe you want to explain how you didn't think it was important to tell me you were dating my best friend's mother." She was shouting now, tears streaming down her face, years of pent-up anger finding its target at last. I stood there, absorbing each verbal blow, unable to find the words that might diffuse her rage. "It's not what you think," I finally managed, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Emily laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that bore no resemblance to the carefree giggle I remembered from her childhood. "It's exactly what I think. You're a liar and a hypocrite. You spent years lecturing me about honesty and integrity, and all this time you've been sneaking around like a teenager. Emily, please." "No." She was crying in earnest now, her shoulders heaving with sobs that seemed to tear through her body. "You've not only disappointed me, you've humiliated me. Do you have any idea what it feels like to find out from someone else that your father is sleeping with your best friend's mom? Do you know how pathetic everyone thinks you are?" Each word was a knife, precisely aimed to inflict maximum damage. I felt myself physically recoil, as if the force of her anger had actual weight behind it. "Who told you?" I asked quietly, though I already suspected the answer. "Jessica found out last week. She's been keeping it from me because she didn't want to hurt me." Emily wiped furiously at her tears with the back of her hand. At least someone was thinking about my feelings. The irony wasn't lost on me, that Jessica, who had seemed so intent on revealing secrets when I'd seen her with Linda in the park, had ultimately tried to protect Emily from this one. But why had she changed her mind? What had happened to make her finally tell Emily about Linda and me? "I'm sorry you found out this way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to tell you myself, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what? That I'd react exactly like this?" Emily shook her head, her expression a mixture of disgust and something deeper, more wounded. "Now I understand why Mom left. She probably couldn't stand living with your lies anymore." That barb hit its mark with devastating accuracy. I physically staggered as if she'd struck me. Your mother left because she fell out of love with me, not because— Save it, Emily shouted, cutting me off again. Now I get it all. Mom was right to leave. Anyone would leave rather than stay with someone like you. And then she said the words I'd been dreading since that first confrontation in the kitchen months ago. The words that had been hanging unspoken between us like a guillotine blade. You're going to die alone, Dad. Alone and miserable, just like you deserve. I felt something inside me crumble, as if the last supporting wall of a condemned building had finally given way. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Linda, no doubt, wondering why I was late for our dinner reservation. Emily noticed, her eyes narrowing. Go ahead, she said, her voice suddenly cold and controlled. Answer it. Go to her. It's what you're good at, isn't it? Running away from the mess you've made. She turned and walked toward the door, each step deliberate and final. At the threshold, she paused, her back still to me. Don't call me, don't text, don't try to explain. I'm done. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow felt more devastating than if she'd slammed it. I stood alone in the silent house, my phone continuing to vibrate insistently in my pocket, the walls seeming to close in around me. When I finally answered Linda's call, my voice was barely recognizable, even to myself. She knows, was all I could say. Emily knows everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then Linda's voice, filled with a resignation that suggested she'd been expecting this moment. I'll be right over. There are things I need to tell you. Things about Margaret that you need to know. As I hung up, I had the distinct feeling that the bomb that had just detonated in my living room was only the first explosion in what would prove to be a much larger war. The revelation came like a thunderbolt on that cold November night. Linda arrived at my door 45 minutes after our phone call, her hair disheveled by the wind, her eyes red-rimmed from what I assumed had been her own confrontation with Jessica. She didn't speak as she entered, just walked past me into the living room and sank onto the couch, her movements heavy with the weight of secrets about to be unburdened. I followed, feeling like a ghost in my own home. The fight with Emily had left me hollow, emptied of emotion, as if my capacity for feeling had been temporarily short-circuited by the overload of pain. I sat across from Linda in Margaret's old armchair, the one I could never bring myself to get rid of, and waited. I should have told you sooner, Linda finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept telling myself I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself. From this moment, from seeing that look on your face when you find out the truth. What truth? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and mechanical. What could possibly be worse than what's already happened? Linda took a deep breath, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Your ex-wife, Margaret, she didn't just leave you for no reason. She left because— Linda paused, closing her eyes briefly as if gathering courage. She left because she was having a relationship with someone else, someone connected to my family. The words hung in the air between us, their full meaning not immediately registering in my stunned mind. What are you saying? Margaret was cheating on me? Linda nodded slowly. Yes, for nearly 2 years before she finally left. A cold, sick feeling spread through my stomach. With who? Someone I know? With my brother, David. The words tumbled out quickly, as if Linda couldn't bear to hold them back any longer. My younger brother who moved to Boston 5 years ago. They met at Jessica's 16th birthday party. I introduced them myself. Her laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. Ironic, isn't it? I'm the one who brought them together. And now here we are. The room seemed to tilt around me as pieces of the puzzle suddenly snapped into horrifying place. David, Linda's charming, successful younger brother, who had always been so interested in our family events, who had offered Margaret a job at his architectural firm when she wanted to restart her career, who had sent an extravagant flower arrangement to our house when Margaret finally left me. Not out of sympathy, I now realized, but celebration. I didn't know at first, Linda continued, her voice steadier now that the worst was out. Margaret and David were careful, but about 3 years ago I caught them together at his apartment when I stopped by unexpectedly. They swore it was a one-time mistake, that it would never happen again. She shook her head, a grimace twisting her features. I believed them, or wanted to believe them. David was my only family after our parents died. And Margaret, well, she seemed genuinely remorseful. But it didn't stop, I said. Not a question, but a statement of fact I somehow already knew to be true. No. It continued right under everyone's noses. They became experts at deception, at creating alibis, at living double lives. Linda's eyes met mine, filled with a sorrow that mirrored my own. That's why I recognized what was happening with us so quickly, Frank. I'd seen the same patterns before, just from the other side of the equation. My mind was reeling, trying to reconcile this new information with the narrative I'd constructed to explain Margaret's departure. I'd told myself she'd grown tired of me, that the empty nest syndrome had hit her harder than expected after Emily left for college, that she needed to find herself as her parting letter had claimed. Never once had I suspected an affair, least of all with Linda's brother. Does Emily know? The question escaped my lips before I'd fully processed its implications. Linda's hesitation told me everything before she even spoke. Yes, she's known for about a year. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. A year? My daughter has known her mother was having an affair for a year and never told me. Margaret swore her to secrecy, Linda explained, her voice gentle but firm. She convinced Emily that telling you would only cause unnecessary pain, that it was better for you to believe she'd simply fallen out of love. Emily agreed to keep the secret to protect you. I laughed then, a harsh, broken sound that startled us both. Protect me? By letting me believe I was so worthless, so unlovable that my wife of 30 years would just walk away without a backward glance? How exactly was that protecting me? Linda had no answer for that. She simply sat in silence, allowing me the space to process this earthquake of revelations that had just shattered the foundation of everything I thought I knew. So let me get this straight, I said after several long moments, my voice dangerously calm. My ex-wife was sleeping with your brother. You knew about it and said nothing. My daughter knew about it and said nothing. And now Emily hates me because I've been seeing you, the sister of the man her mother left me for. I laughed again, the sound edged with hysteria. It's like some twisted soap opera nobody would believe if they saw it on television. There's more, Linda said quietly, and my heart sank even further if that was possible. The reason Jessica finally told Emily about us, it's because David and Margaret got engaged last month. They're planning to announce it at Thanksgiving. The news hit me like a physical blow. Engaged, after barely a year of Margaret being officially gone from our home. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Emily found out from Jessica yesterday, Linda continued. Jessica had seen the ring, overheard them planning the announcement. She was upset. She's never approved of what they did to you, how they lied to everyone. So when Emily came over yesterday, distraught about her mother's engagement, Jessica finally broke down and told her about us too. She said if everyone else was moving on, Emily deserved to know you were as well. Moving on. I repeated the words like they were in a foreign language I was struggling to translate. Is that what this is? Moving on? When Emily burst through the door an hour later, her face was no longer contorted with rage but slack with shock. Her eyes, so like her mother's, moved from me to Linda and back again, as if seeing us both for the first time. Is it true? She demanded, her voice trembling. About Mom and Uncle David? Jessica just told me everything. Linda stood, nodding slowly. Yes, Emily. It's all true. I'm so sorry. Emily seemed to crumple then, all the righteous anger that had fueled her earlier tirade suddenly evaporating, leaving behind only confusion and pain. I moved toward her instinctively, expecting her to recoil as she had before. Instead, she let me guide her to the couch, her body shaking with silent sobs. Why didn't anyone tell me the whole truth? She whispered, looking up at me with eyes swimming in tears. Why did everyone lie? I had no answer that could heal the wound we'd all inflicted on her with our secrets and half-truths. So I simply held my daughter for the first time in months, feeling her tears soak through my shirt, knowing that her anger at me had transformed into something more complex, a confusion that mirrored my own. That night changed everything. Emily's rage toward me shifted, redirected toward her mother, toward the web of deception that had entangled all of us. The revelation came like a thunderbolt, illuminating the landscape of our family's destruction in one blinding flash, revealing the true architects of our collective pain. I never returned to being the same man after that night. The revelations had shattered not just my understanding of my marriage, but the very foundation of who I thought I was. For 30 years, I had been Frank Miller, devoted husband, hardworking father, the steady rock upon which our family had been built. Now I was forced to confront a different reality. I had been Frank Miller, The oblivious, the deceived, the man whose wife had carried on a years-long affair while he remained blind to the signs. The weeks following that night were a blur of painful conversations and sleepless nights. Emily stayed home from college for a while, her classes temporarily forgotten as she grappled with her own recalibration of our family history. I would often find her sitting in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at old family photos with red-rimmed eyes, as if searching for clues she might have missed, moments when the facade had slipped to reveal the truth underneath. "Did you ever suspect?" she asked me one night, her voice small in the darkness of our living room. We had taken to sitting together in the evenings, neither of us able to sleep, both adrift in our shared disillusionment. "Did you ever feel that something wasn't right with Mom?" I considered lying, offering her some comfort by claiming extraordinary intuition I never possessed, but we had all suffered enough from lies. "No," I admitted, the word heavy on my tongue. I trusted her completely. I never looked for signs because I never thought I needed to. Emily nodded, pulling her knees up to her chest on the couch, making herself smaller like she used to do as a child, when thunderstorms frightened her. "I hated you," she whispered, not looking at me. "After she left, I blamed you so much. I thought you must have done something terrible to make her leave. She encouraged me to think that way, you know. Never said it outright, but..." She trailed off, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "I know," I said, because what else could I say? The manipulation had been masterful, designed to keep me isolated in my grief while Margaret built her new life with David. Emily had been collateral damage, a pawn moved strategically across the board of our family's dissolution. Thanksgiving came and went without the grand engagement announcement Linda had warned us about. Instead, Margaret called Emily the night before the holiday, tearfully explaining that the news of her relationship with David had leaked prematurely and that they would be postponing their celebration. Emily listened in silence, then hung up without response. She spent Thanksgiving with me and Linda instead, the three of us attempting a meal that none of us had the heart to truly prepare or enjoy. Jessica joined us for dessert, slipping in quietly after her own obligatory family dinner with David and Margaret. The tension between the girls had eased somewhat, both victims of the same deception, both struggling to redefine their relationship now that the adults in their lives had so thoroughly complicated matters. "They're still planning a June wedding," Jessica informed us as she picked at a slice of store-bought pumpkin pie. Her voice was flat, devoid of the excitement one might expect when discussing a parent's wedding. "Mom says you're both welcome to come, but she'd understand if you decline." This last part was directed at Emily, who snorted derisively in response. "I'd rather drink bleach," Emily muttered, earning a small, approving smile from Jessica. It was strange, this new alliance that had formed from the ashes of our collective betrayal. The girls, once best friends, then briefly estranged by my relationship with Linda, were now united in their disillusionment with Margaret and David. Linda and I, originally drawn together by shared loneliness, now found ourselves bound by something deeper, a mutual understanding of what it meant to be left behind, to be deemed insufficient by those we had loved most. Christmas approached with a heaviness none of us could shake. The empty spaces left by absent family members seemed to expand rather than diminish with time. I found myself avoiding the holiday aisle at the grocery store, unable to bear the sight of cheerful decorations that only highlighted what we had lost. "We should go away," Linda suggested one evening in early December. We were sitting in my kitchen, sharing a bottle of wine after Emily had gone to bed. "Not forever, just for the holidays. Somewhere warm, maybe. A place with no memories attached." The idea took root in my mind, growing stronger with each passing day. By mid-December, we had booked a small beach house in the Florida Keys for the week between Christmas and New Year's. Emily surprised us by asking if she could come along. "I can't face Mom's fake holiday cheer," she explained when I expressed surprise at her interest in joining us. "She keeps calling, wanting to clear the air before Christmas. She shook her head, the words failing her. "You don't have to explain," I told her, grateful beyond measure for this small olive branch. "Of course you can come." That trip wasn't perfect, far from it. There were still moments of awkwardness, sudden silences when conversation veered too close to painful topics. Emily sometimes grew quiet and distant when she saw Linda and me exchange affectionate gestures. Linda occasionally retreated into her own thoughts, perhaps remembering holidays passed with her brother before everything fell apart. But there were good moments too. Moments that felt like healing, or at least the beginning of it. Emily and I walking along the beach at sunset, talking about her plans for after graduation. Linda teaching us both how to make her grandmother's key lime pie. The kitchen filling with laughter for the first time in months. The three of us raising glasses of champagne on New Year's Eve, toasting simply to better days ahead. By the time we returned to Boston in January, something had shifted. The raw, bleeding wounds hadn't healed completely, but they had begun to scab over. Emily returned to college with promises to call more often, to come home for weekend visits when she could. Linda and I continued our relationship, no longer burdened by secrecy but moving forward with a new caution, aware of how fragile happiness could be. Margaret and David did marry that June, in a small ceremony that neither Emily nor I attended. Jessica went, dutiful daughter that she was, but left immediately after the vows were exchanged. She came straight to my house afterward, still in her bridesmaid's dress, and collapsed in tears on my front porch. Emily held her while she cried. Two daughters united in their disillusionment with parents who had prioritized their own desires above all else. I wish I could say that time healed all wounds, that we all eventually found our way to forgiveness and wholeness. The truth is messier, less satisfying than the neat resolutions of fairy tales. Some days I still wake up with anger burning in my chest, remembering the years of deception. Emily still struggles with trust, in relationships and in general, her mother's betrayal having taught her early that those who should love you most can hurt you deepest. But I've learned that love isn't clean or perfect or fair. Love is survival. Sometimes to survive, you have to face the judgment of everyone, including your own daughter. You have to rebuild from scratch what you thought would stand forever. You have to find the courage to trust again, knowing full well the cost of having that trust betrayed. 3 years have passed since that night when Emily stormed into our house with accusations that would unravel the carefully constructed fiction of our family history. Linda and I are still together, our relationship deeper and more honest for having weathered the storm of its beginning. Emily is graduating medical school next month, having channeled her pain into a fierce determination to help others heal. Margaret and David rarely come up in conversation anymore, not forgotten exactly, but relegated to the background of our lives, no longer central characters in our ongoing story. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that we are all both victims and perpetrators in the intricate dance of human relationships. None of us emerges with clean hands from the mess of loving and being loved. The best we can hope for is to cause less harm than we endure, to find moments of grace amid the inevitable disappointments, to build something beautiful from the rubble of what once was. And perhaps most importantly, I've learned that my daughter was wrong that day in the kitchen, when she told me I would die alone. We are never truly alone as long as we have the courage to keep our hearts open, even after they've been broken, even after everything. Looking back on the ruins of what was once my family, I've learned that the most devastating betrayals often come from those we trust the most. When my daughter told me I deserved to die alone, I believed her. When my wife walked away after 30 years, I blamed myself. But sometimes, the stories we tell ourselves are just that, stories. The truth, when it finally emerges from the shadows, can both destroy and liberate us in ways we never imagined. What would you do if everything you believed about your life suddenly unraveled? Would you have the courage to start again at 63? To open your heart knowing it might be broken once more? Would you find the strength to forgive those who deceived you, including your own child? These aren't just questions from my story. They're the crossroads we all face when life strips away our illusions and forces us to rebuild from the ashes of what once was. I never expected to find love again with Linda, especially not in the midst of such complicated circumstances. I never imagined my daughter would come to understand that people aren't simply heroes or villains in the story of our lives, but complex beings capable of both tremendous love and devastating harm. If my journey has taught me anything, it's that it's never too late for second chances, for healing, for the kind of love that doesn't need to be perfect to be worth fighting for. If you found meaning in my story, please follow this channel for more real-life experiences that might help you navigate your own. Like, share, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my shoes?